Hi, everybody. Thanks for making the time for us and for joining. My name is Pete Cole. I'm the president of Gamblin and also the owner. Robert Gamblin is still very much involved as well. And I look forward to doing these things all the time. My goal, I think, is for each of you to get one useful idea, useful technique, maybe a material that's going to help you in your own process in your painting in your studio. So I'm going to cover quite a bit, and I'll try to get you hit all the high points. But as a follow-up, my email is pete@gamblincolors.com, and I'll mention that at the end. And if you have additional questions after the session, feel free to email me, and either I'll get back to you or Mary will, who's also here to help with questions. Please also feel free to type your questions into the chat, and Casey here or Tara will prompt me. And I love interruptions. So, if I'm not answering something, you want me to back up, you want me to slow down, you want me to cover it over again, I'm happy to. So the first thing I'll start with, and Casey, if you can pull up that first image, painting is really rewarding. And it's a wonderful process, but it is hard. And there are tough days from time to time. And I always sort of think about, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? And I think painting really matters, and it probably matters more than ever. The image I'm showing you is of Aboriginal artwork, which many of you probably recognize. And, this was a basic communication of like, I exist, I'm here, I was here. And painting was the way that message was communicated, and it's also endured for centuries. The next image shows cave paintings from Lascaux. Casey, if you can go to the next one. And, painting was how stories were told, and how something resembling a culture began and was carried forward. And again, these are cave paintings from Lascaux that are 25,000 years old. And then the next image is just kind of where we are today, which is that there are more people painting than ever. As artists, we've never had more access to color space. We've never had better materials to work with. And if you look at some of the most important artwork, being created, or most interesting artwork, whether it's Kehinde painting LL Cool J, or Barack Obama, with our paints, by the way, or Christina Bamban is a young artist in New York who I think she's fabulous. But painting is as relevant as ever. It's as important as ever. And no painting medium has the same power of visual communication as oil. Nothing is even close. And I think those of you out there that are oil painters know it and found your way to oils for a reason. So anyhow, that's sort of just to get us started. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is sort of what are these things made of? And then we'll go into, we'll cover about 600 years of color briefly, and try to help you find the colors that best suit your artistic intentions. So our oil paints are bound in linseed oil, also known as flax oil. So this is something that you eat. This is on muffins. This is in vitamins. This is a supplement that people take. It is essentially a vegetable oil. And flax is a fairly humble crop. It doesn't need a lot of water. Ours is grown mostly in Montana. And the flax plant begins as a flower, as you can see in this image. And then if you go to the next image, Casey, it grows into a long stalk, and you can kind of see the pods on the end of those stalks. So when harvest comes, those pods are broken up, the seeds are pressed into linseed oil, and then the stalk of the flax plant is stripped and woven into the linen that we paint on. So one plant gives us the oils that we make our paints with, and the linen that we paint as artists. So there's really nothing more natural or enduring than working with oils. So I'll move into color, and if Casey, if you can show that first image. So what I'm going to talk about, there's basically three eras of pigment history. There are the pigments of classical oil painting that Leonardo da Vinci, among others, worked with. And then you have the colors of Impressionist painting, which Monet's haystacks are a good example of. And I'll talk about those two, and then I'll talk about modern pigments, and then I'll show you a couple of demonstrations to see the differences between the two and why you might select colors from one palette versus another. So I'll start with the classical palette. So oil painting went on for several hundred years with basically different colors of mud to work with. So and these are all basically rocks. Informally here at Gamblin, we call them dirt colors. But these are all pretty much mined rocks. So your sienna is mined in Italy. And then your burnt sienna is burnt. It's burnt in an oven to shift the color to give you burnt sienna. All these colors are fairly transparent and fairly fast drying. And when you look at Da Vinci's at the Mona Lisa or other paintings of that era, they're not faded. These are very light, fast colors. That's just how they looked, and that's what people had to work with, was a very limited palette of neutral colors that are really just kind of like different colors of mud. So in order to create to really communicate, they had to work in layers. They had to do a lot of glazing, a lot of work with light and dark to create drama, to create mood in painting. And they just did not have the opacity and the access to color space that all of us have in our studios. So if you like that look of kind of a classical landscape painting, classical portraiture, this palette of colors is going to be a great foundation for you in your work. So as I mentioned, oil painting went along, and you can show the Impressionist palette. Oil painting went along for a few hundred years with only these colors. And what happened as the world industrialized, mankind put all kinds of things into a blast furnace to figure out what would happen. And what we learned was that by burning different metals at different temperatures, we could create a whole palette of colors with massive opacity, much more intense color. And all of these colors became available within a very short time. And at the same time, the tube was invented. And so for the first time, artists could take their paints out into the world and paint the natural world with colors that match the natural world. So it's almost incomprehensible what that would have been like as an artist. It's like going from having, just your landline phone to having whatever phone you have right now, sort of overnight. So when you look at Impressionist paintings, whether or not, you like them or you want to paint in its style, this was basically a massive celebration by artists of what they could do with all of these new colors that became available to them. So your cadmiums, your viridian, your cerulean, all of these colors with wonderful opacity and color. So if you like the look of sort of an Impressionist style painting, Impressionist landscape, natural color, the cadmiums really want to help you get there. They gray down when they're mixed with each other. They're gray down when they're mixed with white, and they match the colors of the natural world. And I'll demonstrate that for you in a minute. The next set of colors we work with, and this is a painting by Brian Rutenberg, just as an example, are the colors of modern industry. So these are very intense pigments, very transparent pigments, and powerful in mixtures. They don't gray down the way cadmiums do. They retain their intensities in mixtures. So if you're looking for sort of non-natural color, if you want the you want to work with transparency and glaze layers, these are a great palette of colors, and they're all the ones that are hard to pronounce. So it's your phthalos, dioxazine, quinacridone, Hansa, all very intense in mixtures, all with a clean transparency. And then again, just a very high tint stream. Too much for me in most of my work. And I'll talk more about that. But I'll just, as an example, I'll show you a demonstration of two colors, two reds, and then a couple of greens. And then I'll have everyone look and see if there's more questions on color before we start to move through mediums and varnish and preparing surfaces. So I'm showing two colors here, and you can't probably read the labels, but this is naphthol red, which is a modern red, a modern pigment, intense and transparent. And this is cadmium red medium. And I'm just going to mix them with white to show you the difference. So out of the tube, there is not much difference in mist tone. These colors look pretty much the same, right? Especially on this screen, I can see there's virtually no difference. When you mix them with white, and I'll start with the, this is the cadmium red medium. What you're going to see, I'll make this big. Okay. So this is our cadmium red medium and titanium white. And now we're going to do the naphthol. And what I think you can see here is the, I can hold this up. Should I hold this up closer to the camera, Casey? Should I try? So there we go. So your cadmium over here has grayed down, and I'll add a little more white to that so you can see that better. But it has grayed down into kind of a natural looking red. And this is what cadmiums do. And this is what they're supposed to do. And your naphthol red, on the other hand, has mixed into kind of like a hot paint, I would call it. So it has retained its intensity in the mixture. And whereas the cadmium here has grayed down into this very natural looking color. So sometimes I'll hear an artist say, I really wanted to treat myself, so I bought these cadmiums, and they're not always the right thing for every artist, right? So I personally love them because I paint natural landscapes, natural looking colors. These colors work with me really well. The naphthol and some of the other modern pigments are just like a little too hot for me sometimes.
More colors and transparency whiteness.
Yes, yes.
So if you want to just the colors transparency,
Okay, so there's a question about that. Okay, so if you look on our tubes, and I know you guys can't see this. There we go. Under, okay. Okay. So we've got a key for transparency on all of our colors, which is on the back, and it'll say, like, if it's a solid circle, it'll say is solid circle and then opaque. Then we have semi-transparent, where it's half of a circle, and then we have fully transparent colors. There's also a QR tag on the back of all of our tubes of paint now that give you more information online if you shoot that on each color on your palette. So I hope I answered the question, because I can't see it. Okay, we'll come back. I'll give you another demo here. Just to show you another difference between mineral and modern colors. So these two I'm going to show are phthalo green and viridian from our artist grade range. And again, in mass tone, sort of out of the tube, there is a difference, but not a ton of difference, right? Viridian is a bit more matte. Modern colors all tend to be fatter, so they're glossier. And the Viridian is a bit more matte out of the two, but not a ton of difference. And just like with the reds, I'm going to just tint them with white. So start with the Viridian. Sorry, this is the phthalo green. So that's our phthalo. And then I'll show you, this is the Viridian. So Viridian is very gentle in mixtures. It really gives itself up. And you can see here tinted with white, it has grayed down a ton, right, into kind of a muted, natural looking color. Your phthalo green, on the other hand, is sort of this electric eel color. I find phthalo green to be like nuclear in tinting strength, whereas Viridian is just very subtle and gives itself up very easily in mixtures. So as you're building your palette or thinking about adding to your palette, I think the biggest consideration is what era of pigment history are you pulling from? So is it a classical color? Is it a color from Impressionist painting that's going to gray down and match the natural world? Or is it a very intense modern pigment? Because some of these colors, if you have, and many of you have probably experienced this, if you have a mix of mineral Impressionist colors and modern colors, they don't always party well and together. And dioxazine and phthalo green are kind of two that can really take over in mixtures and in your painting and make it kind of frustrating. There's a piece on this on our website under experience color that goes into more detail. It goes through all of our pigments, all of our colors, and maps them, and it's really useful as you're building kind of your own personal palette of colors. So are there questions before we move on and start working through the mediums? Are there questions in the feed about color that I should address, or should we keep moving?
Mary seems all over it. So unless she feels like there's something you need to touch on,
Okay, great.
I'm not
Great.
even
Thank
like,
you, Mary.
I'm like, okay, hands off. Got it.
Okay, so we'll get into the
quickly,
mediums now. And one of the things I like about oils is there really aren't that many mediums. In acrylic, there's sort of like an endless list of mediums, and it leaves you as an artist constantly wondering, am I using the wrong thing? Is there some secret sauce that can make me a better painter? Or am I doing it right? And in oils, it's actually quite simple, even though we have the broadest range of mediums available. I'm going to try to make it simple for you. If you're happy with what you're using, don't change a thing. I don't want to sell you anything you don't need. So if you're really happy with your medium, now's a great time to kind of tune out, work on your grocery list or whatever until I get into things that are more interesting. So I will start with fluid mediums, then gel, and then I'll talk briefly about cold wax. And then we'll move on to varnishing and surfaces. So the first fluid medium you have in your must-have painting set is flax oil. It's linseed oil, and it is still one of the mediums that's used the most. I personally don't use it just because of the two things. I prefer a gel because I'm messy, and it gels stay put, whereas fluids don't. And then when you add linseed oil to colors, you get more flow, you get more transparency, but you also get a slower dry time. And I don't need that. But if you're happy with linseed oil, as a lot of painters are, keep using it. I'm just going to show you a bit with this is India yellow, which is a modern and transparent color, but you can see how easy it is to just make a glaze layer with the linseed oil. Another fluid medium that I want to talk about that is not in your kit is our solvent-free fluid. So if you're looking for something that dries faster than linseed oil, but is solvent-free, our solvent-free fluid is a great choice. It is a tiny bit thicker than refined linseed oil, but it's not that much of a difference. You're not going to, if you're working with linseed oil, you're not going to notice much of a difference if you switch to the solvent-free fluid. But it does the same work of extending your color or just loosening up color out of the tube to make it more brushable, but it dries a few days faster than linseed oil. So again, you're still working with a vegetable oil, no solvent, no other sort of chemistry in there, but you're getting a faster dry time with that same fluid texture that you get from linseed oil. So I'll move from here and show you Galkid Light, which is in your must-have set. If you want kind of one fluid medium that does everything, it is Galkid Light. So a tiny bit thicker than the solvent-free fluid rather. And I'll just show the flow here. I mean, this is an old trick of ours, but let me tip these. And so you can see, I mean, the Galkid here is a little bit thicker and slower moving than the solvent-free fluid was. And I know that's hard to see, it's kind of washed out. But again, same job. It'll get you about a 36-hour dry time in thin layers, which is much faster than linseed and a bit faster still than the solvent-free fluid. And for a lot of people, this is the right medium to keep pace with their work. For me, Galkid Light dries fast enough that sometimes it's like hurrying me up. If I'm outside and it's warm, it'll start to tack up a little bit. And maybe some of you experienced that. So it's a little fast for me, but for a lot of folks, it's kind of a just right fluid painting medium. I will move on to gels. Okay, so I'll move on to gel mediums. The one you have in your must-have set is solvent-free gel. And this is something we developed about 8 years ago to really give people the same possibilities with traditional gel mediums, but without the solvent. You can see, I hope you can see, this is not really going anywhere, which I like. And I'll show this to you both in a glaze and then with paint out of the tube. So I can use, again, this is the India yellow I'm showing you. I can use just a touch of this to kind of loosen it up, or I can use more and I can create glaze layers, and I can also create textured glazes. So I've got a bit of, and this will round your marks slightly, but it will hold those marks in that texture. And it won't, versus fluids will kind of level out in your work. And I personally like, even though my painting may not be amazing, I like I like paintings when you can see the hand of the artist in the work and you can see the brushwork. And so I personally choose a gel medium for that reason as well. And then I'll show it to you. This is just ultramarine blue, and we'll take a touch of this. Yes, recenter. Thank you. Thank you. So again, you can use just a touch of it here to loosen up this ultramarine blue, make it a little more brushable. And as with you can also use more to create, a thin layer of color.
Gel.
Okay, so question about fat over lean. All mediums are fat, basically. You're adding vegetable oil. And so in terms of layering, fat over lean scares a lot of people. In reality, I wish it wasn't as much of a topic, to be honest, because if you use any amount of medium in any kind of reasonable way, you eliminate the fat over lean concern. So you have lean colors, which generally the colors of classical oil painting are lean. Your siennas, your umbers, your cadmiums are kind of in the middle. And then your modern pigments are the fattest colors. But when you introduce medium or you start mixing these colors together, you moderate those differences in fat. And the issue of like, is it going to wrinkle? Is it going to flake? The things people try to scare you with, those all go away. So again, all mediums are fat, and it's as you add fat, you're moderating the differences in your colors as you are when you mix them together. So it's been up for all the questions I get I'll get 100, 1,000 questions about fat over lean. Nobody has actually had a problem. Everyone's afraid of having one, but no one's actually had one. So thank you. The last gel medium I'll show you is Galkid gel. There we go. Okay. And this one is the fastest drying gel medium we make. And it also enables you to make the thickest texture. So you can see, this is a real, and that's quite a bit. And if you want a gel medium that also moves along your dry time, this is a great choice. And it'll hold marks more sharply than the solvent-free gel will. Solvent-free gel will kind of it'll hold them, but they'll be rounded. Whereas the Galkid gel will hold much sharper marks. And same thing, extends your color. You can create thin layers, or you can create thick layers. And on its own, it's kind of a 36-hour dry time. And again, the thickness that you're using and the colors you're using. To show you some of that texture, so that this will hold those kinds of marks, and this will dry and look like it does right now. So just to kind of recap mediums, so fluids and gel. I would suggest, if you're looking for a fluid medium, I would suggest Galkid Light as a great round fluid medium. If you want a solvent-free option, go with the solvent-free fluid, obviously. And then for a gel medium, I personally think Galkid has a lot to offer. Galkid gel has a lot to offer. And then as a solvent-free option, you have our solvent-free gel. The other medium that I won't show you is Neo-Megilp. And Neo-Megilp is basically kind of in between Galkid gel and solvent-free gel in working properties. It's not as fast drying as Galkid. It's a little bit faster than the solvent-free gel. and it's a little bit silkier, which is really hard to show here. But it has more slip to it. So if you want to really be able to slide your brush across your canvas, the name again is Neo-Megilp. And I'll tell you a brief story about Neo-Megilp, and by way of explaining like what are all these mediums anyway and what are they made of. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the next image, I think. Go one, let's see, there should be, yes. So this is kind of the story of how Neo-Megilp was made. The painting you see is a painting by Turner that was at the Tate, London, and Robert Gamblin was brought in to help on some conservation work for a whole series of Turner's paintings. He used a medium called Merige, which you don't need to remember, but it's sort of a snobby medium, and it was made by basically boiling linseed oil and then dissolving Damar into it and then thinning it with turpentine, and lead was also part of the mixture. So like really not good to be around, and also not good for your painting. So it's also had a nickname black oil, and you can see it in the image here on the left, the very dark medium. Turner used it extensively in his work, and he created all sorts of glaze layers, textured glaze layers, and it aged terribly. When he passed away, there was a stack of paintings underneath his bed that were basically gray. The Damar had shifted the color so much that they were almost, they're just very difficult to even make out the artwork. So Robert got a sample of it, and from the Tate London, and developed Neo-Megilp to basically be a contemporary Merige that had the working properties of Merige, but so true to historic working properties, but safer, more permanent. No Damar, no turpentine. There is a bit of Gamsol in it. That's it. And then we extended from there to create Galca gel and also the solvent-free gel option for people. All of these mediums are formulated with a soybean alkyd derived from American soybeans. And in some cases, like the solvent-free, we use a bit of safflower oil. So these are known materials. These are plant oils that artists have been working with for hundreds of years. So very permanent, very reliable, very simple, very safe for you to be around, safe for the environment, and safe for the life of your painting. Okay. Should I talk briefly about Gamsol, or are people familiar enough with it? Sometimes I get the question of, how safe is it, et cetera. Is there anything that I should answer there, or should I keep moving into varnishes? Watching the chat here. I'll talk about Gamsol a little bit. Okay, so Gamsol is the safest solvent available that does the job of an artist solvent. The job of an artist solvent is that you need to be able to thin colors. You need to be able to thin mediums. It also needs to evaporate completely out of your work, and to enable drying of the oils. And there's alternatives out there that can do some things, but none of them can do everything. And some of them can be really problematic in your painting. Gamsol it's like synthetic motor oil. It does come from crude oil, but it is highly refined and essentially synthesized so that all of the harmful aromatics that you find in a turpentine or a mineral spirit are refined out of it. If you've ever been around turpentine, and I think probably everyone on this call is, there's a smell to it that you notice real quick. That is the harmful aromatics. And what's most unfortunate is that the things that are the worst for you are also the things that evaporate the fastest, and you smell them and you feel them. So the xylene, toluene, other kind of known carcinogens that are in turpentine and cheap solvent, they evaporate very aggressively, very rapidly. They're the first things to exit, and they're the first things to kind of enter your body. I used to work with it. I painted a lot of houses to get through college. I called them were large monochromatic works is what I refer to them, but I was around a lot of turpentine and I would get itchy, I would get irritable, and had all sorts of reactions to it very quickly. And with Gamsol, there is none of that. It evaporates 5 times more slowly than water. While we recommend, having ventilation in your studio, you don't need it. With Gamsol, the natural flow of air in your house is really enough to be safe around it. And the only thing you really can't do with it is drink it. And but it's a great product, and it's worth it, and it happens to be the thing we make the least amount of money on, just for trivia. In fact, our large sizes became unprofitable, but we want it to be within the reach of artists so that they're working with it and something cheaper and not something that's better for their well-being rather than alternatives. So that's a bit on Gamsol. Okay, I'm going to cover cold wax. I will cover cold wax briefly. I promised I would, and then we'll get into varnishing. So cold wax is super fun. Yes, I have a question.
Over this cut.
Yeah. So the thing I would have you, it's hard to different things get sold as odorless that aren't totally odorless, or they get sold as a mineral spirit, and they can be they're basically cocktails of leftover cheap chemicals from other processes. So you from one can to another, I can't tell you what you're getting. What you can do is pull the SDS sheet, the safety data sheet, and what you'll generally see. So Gamsol has a flash point of 143 degrees. Turpentine has a flash point of 95 degrees. So that's like the trunk of your car. And that's a good proxy. The lower that flash point, the more harmful aromatics you have in there. And the higher the flash point, the more refined a material that you have. So that is a good thing to kind of look at. And if you're in the kind of 120, 130 range, 120, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, you've got yourself a pretty good solvent there. If you've got Gamsol, you're at 143. But if you're seeing numbers closer to 100, that is a cheaper solvent. And generally speaking, that's going to be one that is going to evaporate faster and have harsh aromatics in it. Okay, I answered that question. Okay, great. Okay, so cold wax, made from beeswax, does all sorts of things. I mean, it is primarily the artists value it for its texture. And so it is just fabulous to work with to create really textured marks in your painting. And a lot of artists will use it kind of like I'm showing here. And then let me tip that. And then you can cut into it and it will hold those marks, and no flow whatsoever on your canvas or your panel. So I love it for the texture. I love it because you can dissolve a little bit of it into any of our mediums to make them a little more matte. So there's a lot of artists that will mix Galkid gel together with our cold wax to create something with a lot of texture that also has a decent dry time. And it can also be used in thin layers. Show this with not much color, if you like, to create an encaustic look. So you get kind of that, you'll see a lot of cold wax work where there's kind of a real soft light, kind of haunting feel to it. And you can create that with the cold wax here in a thin layer. And same thing, you can cut into that, you can layer over it. But it's fabulous. It's a fabulous medium if you want a little bit of texture. It'll hold your brush marks as well, and they'll dry like exactly as they were, even more so than with Galkid gel. So cold wax is just kind of it's a lot of fun and it keeps getting more popular. Texture is kind of clearly trending. And with Polwex, you can build up real thick layers like that. Okay. I'm going to move on to varnishing. And if anyone is ready to varnish, you can follow along with me and varnish at home and then chime in with questions on the chat if you like. So let's talk a little bit about why varnish. It is the easiest way to make your painting look better. So if you paint something and it looks fabulous wet, and then a week or two later, some of the colors have kind of matted out a little bit, that's typical. Particularly your earth colors will shift and become a bit more matte, a bit duller. And then and as the painting dries. And with varnishing, you deepen the color, you saturate the color, you unify the surface of your painting, and you've also protected it, which I don't think about it all that much because, they're my paintings and I look after them, but it's worthwhile. But really, it's just a lot of things in oil painting come hard. Varnish is like real easy and a really great way to make your painting look better. I'll show you before I go. I'll talk a bit about what Gamvar is made of. So these are two paintings that where a Damar-based varnish was used. If you never heard of a Damar-based varnish, just plug your ears. You don't need to. If you did hear of it and use one, I'll talk a little bit about it just for context. So these are two paintings that have been cleaned at the National Gallery in Washington. And when they clean, they go from left to right. And what you see on the right is the Damar varnish as it aged over the top of these paintings. And then as it's cleaned on the left-hand side, you can see how well the colors performed and how terribly the varnish performed. The other problem you have with a traditional Damar varnish and other varnishes is that they're quite thick. So what happens is you get the texture of your painting gets leveled out a bit by the varnish. That creates the impression of even more gloss because you have a flat surface bouncing light back out at you and hot spots, and it's impossible to photograph. And it just looks kind of fake, doesn't look like oil. They're also formulated with turpentine, so they're fun to be around for you. They're not good for the environment, and they're not good for your painting. So we developed Gamvar working with the Getty, the Tate, and the National Gallery in Washington. This is what they use on their paintings. Hindi's Portrait of Obama was Gamblin materials varnished with Gamvar. It's kind of the real deal. And it is very thin. It's thinner than water. It's about as thin as Gamsol. You want to apply it as thinly as possible, use it little as possible. And you can always, add more layers if you want more gloss, but you really want to use like as little as possible when you work with it. And I'll demo that and you can follow at home. So I'll show you. I'm going to work with a bunch of paintings here and kind of switch based on which ones seem to party best with the camera. So this painting, let's see if we can get it. There it is. Okay, so there's a single brush. There's a question. Okay, so this is a good one. So again, let me tip that. This is not showing up super well. But you can see this kind of band where the color is more saturated and these darks really pop, whereas they don't up above here. And again, I'm going to varnish a couple paintings here. We'll see if we can communicate this better. If you're on Instagram, just search for Gamvar and you will get tons of videos, some of which have like 1.5 million views that really show super well how the varnish changes the look of your paintings, deepens color, saturates color. So that is a better resource than what I'm going to try to do here, but I'm going to do my best. That question. So first question is, when can I varnish my painting? And the rule of thumb with Gamvar is just the thumbnail test. So take your painting and just press into the thickest area of it with your thumbnail. And if you can't make a dent, it feels firm, you're ready to varnish. And that could be within a week. That could be a couple of weeks. It could be a month. But this old adage of, wait 6 months, wait a year is not relevant to Gamvar. The thumbnail test is all you need. So I'll start with this. So this is unvarnished, and I'm just going to try to get you a feeling here for what the surface quality looks like before the varnish and the color. And then I'm going to apply. So I'm just using a can here. Use anything you want. I also use a lot of like jars before recycling them. Any container is fine. Where did my game? Oh, here we go. Where did my gloss go? Here we go. Okay. So I'm just going to put a little bit into this can. And then I'm going to use my varnish brush here. This is the Gamvar brush. It's made of synthetic bristles, and it's designed specifically for varnishing. And I'm just going to dip. I'm getting the tiniest amount here on the end of the bristles. And then I'm going to get out, as much as I reasonably can. Okay. And then I'm just going to give you kind of, trying to think the best way to show this. I'm left-handed, so bear with me. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm trying to get it as thin as I can. And I'm not brushing, aggressively, but I'm not, there's no need to kind of like go in rows. You just, particularly if you have some texture in your painting, you just want to, prop your strokes a bit. Just gonna keep going. And again, just as thin as possible. I like to kind of tip my painting in the light as I'm varnishing to make sure, see if this shows, just to make sure that I've gotten kind of everything, because I missed the corners or I miss spots. If you have a lot of texture, you can kind of scrub it in if you need to. But again, I'm just going as thin as possible. I'm going to use as little as possible and get a nice even coat. This will dry. This will be dry by tomorrow at this time. It's about a 24-hour dry time. And again, I'm using the gloss that is in your must-have set. So one of the things you'll see kind of particularly up in here is that those darks kind of came back and got deeper. The color got a bit richer. And I know this is hard. Hopefully some of you are doing it there. You get a bit of gloss there, but you can still see kind of my brush marks, right? I haven't flattened this thing out too much. And it'll calm down from this when it's dry. But you can see up in here, these are like real kind of wimpy, thin brush marks, but they're still there and you still see them. And again, that's our gloss. If you wanted more gloss, you could add another layer. You could add a third layer if you wanted to, and keep building it up. But again, it's a gloss, but it makes your painting look like it's wet. It looks like it was when it was on your easel. And I love it. So I'll try, yes, question. Okay, so question of can you continue to paint over Gamvar? We don't recommend it. Gamvar is removable. with our Gamsol, which I'll demonstrate here later. But if you wanted to get back into your painting, you would do what I'll show in a few minutes, which is use a bit of Gamsol to just gently rub and lift that varnish layer off, and then you can get back into your painting. And that's a real easy thing to do. Gamsol is mild enough that it won't hurt your painting, but it will remove the Gamvar, and that's very important to conservators. They want to protect a painting, but they want to be able to get back into it if conservation science finds better ways to preserve the painting or maintain the painting, or even if it just changes hands from one museum to another and they have a different perspective on how they want works of the old masters to look. So Gamvar is totally removable, totally odorless, by the way, in about a 24-hour dry time. I'm going to try to show you, and if it doesn't work, I'll do another demo. So this painting, let's see. Okay, this painting is half varnished with the satin, and that's this side. Sorry, this is the unvarnished side. This is the varnished side. And you can see this is the satin. It's a subtle difference. You can see it in the blue sky where it bounces a little bit of gloss, and then the unvarnished side over here doesn't. And see if I can get that to show up a little bit better. There you go. So you can see again on this side, there's a bit of gloss there. The colors are a bit more saturated. That's going to be harder to see. But again, not much, right? Like color looks better, but it doesn't look, I hate those paintings you see in a gallery sometimes and you're like, oh, they varnished that. And it's just super thick and too glossy and kind of plasticky looking. Gamvar doesn't do that. So I'll show you that one. I'll varnish another one here real quick to see if I can get it to show up a little bit better. This one is a bit bigger, so bear with me. Okay, so we'll start with kind of, yes, question. So the question, can you varnish over cold wax? Yes, you can. Your cold wax is going to have a longer dry time. But if you're mixing cold wax with color, you could absolutely varnish. The varnish has a bit of Gamsol in it. So if you had like cold wax by itself, without any color, I would have some concern that the Gamsol could dissolve it a little bit. But if you're mixing it with your colors, you're totally fine to varnish with Gamvar. Another question. Yep. It's never too late to varnish a painting. Nope. There's no window that you're going to miss. And there's a lot of artists that have gotten on to Gamvar that never varnish their paintings because of bad experiences with Tamar and other materials of the past. And there's a lot of folks, that's Casey too. There's a lot of folks that have varnished them and like, oh my God, and then just party and go through all these old paintings and varnish them and are so happy. So it's never too late. Since there's a question about cold wax can also be used as a matte varnish, and it doesn't provide as much protection as Gamvar, but it's an option. And show it to you here. So I'm trying to get you a look at the surface quality of this thing before I get in here, but it gets you a matte, real soft matte finish. And I'll just kind of go. Let's see if that can show, but it gives you kind of, and I put a little bit too much on just to that's not showing up. Well, that's something to try at home. And if you don't like it, just take a bit of, you can actually probably just get it off with a cloth, or you can use a bit of Gamsol and lift it right off. And the same is true even as it dries. You'll be able to remove that layer if you decide you don't like it with a little bit of Gamsol. So this one will also varnish, and I'll try to do like a half and half here for folks. Make it this back in frame. There we go. Okay. So just going to do this bit here. Same thing. Try and tip this. You can see, okay, you can this way. Okay. Okay, there we go. So okay, thank you, Casey. So you can kind of see, let me get this is the varnish side, and then the other side is the unvarnished side. You can see that line there. And you can see in the grass and some of the shadows how that color has kind of deepened and saturated. And in other areas of the painting, it's just kind of, it's good, but it's not like the varnish side. And I see a question in the chat. So Gamvar can be used with both oil and acrylic paintings, and a lot of acrylic painters have found their way to it. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just finish varnishing this, and you get a look at that, and then I'll show you kind of the removability piece of it as well. Yeah. So again, just as little as possible, using the light to make sure I don't miss any spots. Just a smidge more. Okay, that is about done. Sometimes I'll just dry my brush off on a rag and come back in and pick up like any little bit where I see it might be a tiny bit thicker than another area. You don't have to do that, but if you get too much on, just rub your brush on a rag and come back in. As far as cleaning your varnish brush, you don't actually have to. When you're done with it, you can just put it down, let it dry. When you put it back into varnish, the Gamsol in the varnish will dissolve any that's on the bristles, and you're good to go. If you do that long enough and for enough times, you might get little like specks in your brush. Clean it with Gamsol, clean it with soap and water, but it's not with old time varnishes. It's like that brush was done. You varnish with a Damar based brush, and it's just sticky mess, and you don't use that brush over again. Throw it away. With the Gamvar brush and Gamvar, you can use it over and over again. So I'm going to try to show you that surface quality. So we had matte areas and we had less matte areas. We've evened all those out. We've saturated the color. I've got a pretty intense light beaming at this thing. So that gloss you see isn't really that glossy. Okay. Are there more questions I should address, or we're doing good? Oh. Okay, so I'll show the removability. So this was that painting I showed you at the beginning where I've got that swath of varnish through the middle there, that diagonal. Okay. And I think this was done a couple of years ago. We had a demo like this and we just kind of pulled it off the wall and did this. And I'd like to not just have that one smear of varnish through there. So I'm just going to take my Gamsol and I'm going to take a rag. Anything is really fine, just not something that's going to leave behind a lint. So like I wouldn't use a paper towel in general for anything like this, but any old t-shirt, any rag you have is fine. And I'm just going to rub this Gamsol onto this area where I had that mark. And this is still going to be a little bit wet when I'm done. So you'll look at it and be like, well, wait a second, it doesn't look like you got it all off. But the Gamsol will evaporate off, and it will, I'll have a unified surface. So I'm just going to kind of rub with the grit side. The Gamsol is not going to hurt your painting. I'm pushing, not like hard, but I'm pushing a little bit, and I'm just lifting that Gamvar right off. So if someone asks, and what if I want to get back into my painting? Just do what I just did. Wait till the next day, and you're in business. So this is going to still look a little bit glossy in that spot because of the Gamsol, but not like it was. And again, by tomorrow, this will be a unified surface like the you see up here in the sky. So that's removability. There's 3 flavors of Gamvar. There's the matte, the satin, and the gloss. The gloss is more popular. We sell more of it, but not by much. And it was also the first one we made. If you're kind of like unsure, if you have like a real soft look in your paintings and you're real nervous about gloss level, I would say take the satin. The satin we formulated to be kind of perfect for the artists we heard from that said, I don't like having too much gloss. So we tried to make like perfection. And then if you want more, you go to the gloss. And if you want a real matte look, go to the Gamvar matte. And there's a question.
Is there any length of time that the Gamvar can have been used to get to remove that?
Okay. So the question was, there was a question before about, is it too late to varnish? No, it's never too late. And this question is, what if I varnished and a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, I want it to remove it? It'll be as easy to remove 3 years from now as it is tomorrow. So there's no time limit on. Okay. Are there more questions on varnishing that I should answer? Mary's got them. Okay. And the way we're making them, the way we're reducing gloss level is by mixing in essentially the same beeswax we use in the wax. That is the matting agent. And basically the way that the matting works is if you have like a real high gloss, right? Like a real syrupy, thick layer of varnish on your painting, it's a flat surface and it bounces light right back to you. And that your brain translates that as high gloss. With the beeswax, we have a little bit of beeswax in there for the satin and the matte, and that's just diffusing. So it's bouncing in all different directions, not just back into your eyes. And that our brain sees as a more matte surface, a softer look, softer color. And I love the look of artists that work with the matte, and they have that really soft glow to their paintings. It's a great look for a lot of people and for their work, but not for everybody. But that's what's happening, is that beeswax is just diffusing light and giving you that soft look that your brain translates as, okay, that's a matte surface. Okay. Other questions I should address? Okay. So the next thing I was going to do was talk a little bit about just preparing your surfaces. We get a lot of questions about this. And so I'm going to show you our Gamblin ground and our ground and gesso blade. And I'm going to start with, this is kind of one of the cool things you can do with ground is, this is a painting of a house I used to have, and I don't really like the painting. So I'm going to basically just I've given it a little bit of a sanding. Let's see if we can see that. Okay, this side is glossy still. This side I gave a bit of a sanding to. You can see just before we started. I'm just brushing it off. But I'm just going to use, and I used a bit of sandpaper just to kind of rough it up, particularly if you varnished your painting. This is something you'd want to do. But one of the cool things about ground is that you can turn paintings that didn't come out that well into a new surface to work with. And you can't do this with acrylic gesso, but you can do it with oils and with our oil painting ground. So this is our new ground and gesso blade. There's two sizes of it. They're the first and only artist tool made from 100% recycled materials. They're made just across the river from where we're sitting here today. And they are like perfect for this job. And everything else, and we've tried it, and Robert Gamblin has, everything else is just terrible. It's you waste water cleaning rollers, you ruin brushes, you spend much time cleaning brushes. This just wipes clean, and you get a perfect, even coating. If you're working on cradled panels, you can do the sides real quick and easy. And I'm just doing kind of a thin layer here. You know, you can see the painting kind of coming through underneath a little bit. And I'll probably would do a second thin layer on this. You can also use this blade to apply your gesso if you use an acrylic gesso, and it'll also apply our PVA size if you're preparing like raw linen or canvas. You want a layer of PVA size first if you're starting with raw linen. So I've got some streaks here just because I've got texture in the painting. And no big deal. I could have sanded it more if I wanted to, but I didn't really care. So, but it's that easy. Question. Yes, you can. Yes. And Mary, let Mary chime in if she wants to talk about preparing paper.
She's size prepared
Okay, in the chat.
in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that if Mary wants to talk about preparing paper. Okay.
Hi, everybody. This is Mary here. I've been chatting away with some of you in the chat. Thanks for all the great questions folks have put in the chat over there. Catherine asked a great question on the use of paper for oil painting. I love using paper for small studies, practice paintings. They're easy to store when it's on paper as opposed to a stretched canvas or panel. And yes, you can use our Gamblin oil ground to prepare your paper surfaces. It's really an amazing primer if any of you have never painted on an oil-based primed surface. The way that your paint glides is different. The way that your colors dry to a more vibrant, saturated hue without sinking into the paper just makes it phenomenal. You do want to check your paper first. There are specific oil paint papers designed for oil painting. They usually say oil paper on the package and description. But if you have any ordinary watercolor paper, you can use our PVA size in one coat to the front of the paper to prepare that for oil ground on top. Clyde just asked a great question on the dry time of oil ground. Now, this is why Pete's application tool with our Gamblin ground and gesso blade is so useful, because it gets a very thin coat of oil ground on your painting, and you want that to be very thin so it dries within just a day or two. If you put that on too thick, it's going to take days or even weeks to dry. So scrape it on thinly with a tool. And usually 1 to 2 days is how long it can take to dry. It may take a little longer if it's cold or wet or humid. So keep that in mind. PVA size is not designed for wood panels, which is what Fran just asked. PVA size is primarily meant for paper or raw fabric like canvas or linen. Wood panels actually can be sealed with our Galkid medium that we covered earlier in this demonstration. If you take our Galkid, dilute it with some Gamsol. You can use that actually to seal a wood panel really nice before you can put oil ground on your wood panel. To clarify that, you actually don't need to seal your wood panel before you put Gamblin oil ground on a wood panel. You don't need to seal it ahead of time. It doesn't hurt if you want to, you can. I just always like to mention that it's not necessary. So if you want to skip that step, feel free. All right, I am going to mute myself now and go back into the chat and let Pete continue on with his demo. Great job, Pete.
Thanks, Mary. So the other thing you can do with the ground is tint it with any oil color you have. As you prefer. It's kind of funny to me, like a white canvas for me is terrible to paint on. And people always talk about, oh, a blank canvas, nothing makes me happier than a blank canvas. Well, you know, it's a real pain to paint on pure white, and you basically are working with like the lightest value. You have all this light bouncing off of it at you. So I generally work with a toned canvas. So I just mixed in some Portland Gray Deep, and I'll tone my panels like this to kind of a mid value when I'm landscape painting. And then I have some reference of like, okay, I match the tone of my gray to what I think I'm painting. This would be like there's some coast paintings you saw here. So this would be kind of a soft, cloudy day at the coast. And my gray is kind of my mid value in the painting. And I know, you know, I can see when I go lighter and I can see when I go darker, and I have kind of a reference point. And it helps me to get some harmony in my painting. So I just mixed some warm white in here while Mary was talking, just to tint this ground. And I'll show that to you. But I like a warm, like a kind of a parchment color if I'm painting something that's warm. And then I'll do a gray if I'm painting kind of a cooler scene. And people do all sorts of things. You often see artists that work with a tone red, and then they'll use that around trees and things where they don't cover the canvas fully, and that red kind of pops. There's all sorts of tricks you can do with a tone canvas, but I would say experiment with that. And it's really, everything is better than pure white. And unfortunately, you know, everything comes to us that way, but toning is just a great way to just make things easier for you, particularly in achieving kind of color harmony and having a range of values in your work that makes sense. So that was pretty much everything I was trying to cover in this session. And I wanted to leave time. I can tell if people are interested, I can just give a bit of a sort of a Gamblin update since we're sitting here in the factory today. But for now, I'll just wait. And if people have questions, somebody prompt me.
Right.
Okay, Casey's pulling up the chat here. So, okay, so let's see. Okay. Okay. Okay, so there's a question about new products. Let's see here. Okay, I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I just thought
Okay.
you could talk
Okay,
about
so there's
the
a question
palette.
about palettes.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. There's good content on our website. If you go into experience color, there's a section on exploring color palettes. And there's a classical palette, there's a landscape palette, there's suggestions for painting water. There's limited palette suggestions, which Mary has given a limited palette of quinacridone red, Hansa yellow, and phthalo blue. That is sort of getting you maximum access to color space with the fewest possible colors. So again, that was quinacridone red, Hansa yellow, and phthalo blue. The limited palette isn't for everybody. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. And it does help with getting reading your paintings versus working with like 20 different tube colors on your palette. New products. So we introduced the varnish brush a few years back. People love them, and I don't think there's very many people left varnishing paintings that are not using it. Just based on the numbers, it's not possible. We introduced our studio knives a couple of years ago. You've probably seen them. They're in kind of standard sizes, but you've got a really nice ergonomic handle. You have a one-piece blade that doesn't break at the hinge. You have um, a matte steel that doesn't bounce light back at you, and you don't have that cheap chrome coating that flakes off into your paint or into your painting. And they've got kind of a progressive flex. So a lot of knives you'll find they're like a sword. There's just no movement in it. There's no bend in it, and it kind of limits your mark making. These have a nice progressive flex. So you get a bit of bounce, and they stiffen as you push them more. This is the Robert. It's Robert Gamblin's favorite, and I love it for cutting lines and edges. It's just so much better than any standard shape for that work. The ground and gesso blade came out very recently. You may not have seen that yet in your store. It comes in two sizes. Again, it's 100% recycled plastic made here in America, and just fabulous for doing the job of applying ground, gesso, and PVA size. We're working on another medium. Mary mentioned if you called us and you said, what do I use to oil out my painting? We'd say half Galkit, half Gamsol. If you called us and you said, what's a good thin oil painting medium for kind of washes and early layers of my painting, we'd say half Galkit, half Gamsol. And if you asked us, what should I use to seal a panel before I paint on it? If you had one that felt like it was going to be real absorbent, it'd be half Gamsol, half Galkit. So we're looking at basically formulating that. So as like a 3-in-1 tool for your studio, and trying to bring that to you by the end of the year. And then we're also beginning work. We've introduced some new colors in our Reclaimed series. Reclaimed are a brown ochre, iron violet. And those colors are available in our Reclaim set. And we're working on developing more colors for both our 1980 range and our artist grade range. For us, colors really need to earn a place on our palette and on yours. So there's a lot of colors we know how to make, but we want to enable artists to mix color. And if we're going to add something new, it has to create a meaningful new possibility for artists, and it has to be a really useful tool. So if you look back at our Portland cool gray, our Portland warm gray, our cool white, our warm white, those are really tool colors we formulated for artists that have been incredibly popular and helpful to artists. So we're looking to do more of that, and not just find pigments and develop them into color and push them out. That's not really what we do here. So I'm looking again at the questions here. Let's see. Mary, thank you for the links on these. Just a quick, brief update on Gamblin. I'm sitting just above our factory floor here in Portland, Oregon. We have 29 people here. That includes overhead, figurehead, people like me, down to pick, pack, ship, receiving materials, making the paint, everything. 29 people all here under one roof. And we recently received our B Corp or Benefit Corp certification. So we're the first American color house to become a certified B Corp. And it's really, it's important to us to be responsible in terms of how we treat our people, how we interact with our community here, how we can look after the environment. And it was really kind of like a logical extension for us to become a B Corp. A lot of work, but the right thing to do. And we're very proud of that. And I've been running Gamblin for 16 years now. And like Robert, we're just trying to make our moms proud. So I feel good about the way we treat our people. And you guys should feel real good about when you buy our tubes of paint. I've got a team of people here that all have healthcare, 4 to 5 weeks of vacation a year so they can spend time with their families. We support remote work. There's a whole slew of things we do, and you're supporting that. You're also supporting our work in conservation with the great museums of the world to preserve our visual history. That's a money-losing venture for us, but it's very important work, and no one else is going to do it if we don't. And you're supporting that as well. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be your color maker. And I can tell you the people here really appreciate it as well. And they see everything, like Mike and Phil are in the mix area today. Chris and Matt on the mills, and everything goes through their hands and they don't miss anything. So I guess thank you.
This has been amazing,
Okay.
Pete. Like, I mean, I, because we know each other a long
Yes.
time. I've been in the industry for 30 years and I learned a ton today along with you guys. So this was really fantastic. I mean, to be able to get that education myself, and then to hear about all of the background, and Plaza feels good about supporting also a company like Gamblin, so it goes both ways, right? And so they're great partners. You guys are great partners. This really has been fantastic. I think this will be a resource that will be available for a long time. So, thank you all for being here. This has been amazing. One thing that I can do, I want to check and make sure, Pete, that you have nothing else that you want to cover. But I did want to give a heads up that if anybody varnished something today, we can turn on the gallery view, or if you have an oil painting or just a piece of your work laying around, turn on the gallery view and your cameras, and we can do a little share. Pete, do you have anything else that you would like to cover?
Just as a reminder, if you do have questions that we didn't get to, or that come to you after, just email me directly, pete@gamblincolors.com, and either Mary or I will get back to you. And then down the road, through our website, you can book a personal consultation with Mary on anything you want to talk about. Those are free of charge. Mary's, as you can tell, she's fantastic. Mary's a painter as well, and she's available. Just go to our website, and I think through Contact Us, you can book a session with her on Zoom, and we'll spend whatever time we need to spend with you to get you where you want to go. So that's all I had.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete. Really appreciate it. Appreciate everyone being here for our first event of 2024. All right, so I'm going to change my view to gallery. Please turn your cameras on and share some work. We got anything, Allie? Allie's going to call you out. No, not one. Come on.
Oh,
Okay.
that's okay.
All right. Well, next time if we do an event, Pete, we can do something where there's a little more maybe sort of creating some kind of image along in the event, together, a little bit more interactive. That's when they share. I was just hoping to see anything somebody varnished today. But anyway, this was fantastic, super learning experience, perfect event to kick off our new year. So right now we're going to say goodbye. And then again, you can email events@plazaart.com if you need anything from Plaza, and then you've got lots of access to Gamblin, which is you guys got it today. All right, thank you so much. See you at the next one. Thank you, Gamblin, Pete, Mary, Casey. Really appreciate it. You guys are great. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.